and welcome to Logan Sounds Off. Today I am interviewing Don Letts. Don, how are you?
Fine, thank you, and thanks for having me, Logan.
It's fine, the pleasure is all mine. It's brilliant to have you on the podcast. So, for those who don't know you, could you tell the viewers a little bit about yourself?
Oh man, how much time have you got? Listen, I'm as old as rock and roll, Logan. I was born in 1956, and I'm of the generation that, when I was growing up as a teenager, our only form of alternative information and inspiration was the music that we listened to. And it was via that, that medium that I became the man I am today. I am the product of music. The first band I ever saw was a band called The Who. And this was in 1971. And I saw them, I was like 14 years old. And I was so fascinated by what I was hearing and what was unfolding in front of my very eyes that I thought, I want to be part of this world. I didn't necessarily want to be in a band or be a singer. I just wanted to be part of this kind of, this new world, this new energy, and from that day to this, music's been my guiding light and my inspiration. I'm an example of what music can do.
That's an incredible way to explain yourself. And as you'll see throughout the interview, you'll see that that's exactly true. So now, first of all, Don, I wanted to ask about your childhood. And with Jamaican roots and being born in London, I imagine you would have listened to some very interesting tunes. So could you kind of explain further about what you listened to growing up?
Okay, yeah, I can do that. Well, my parents are part of what they call the Windrush generation, who came over from Jamaica in the 50s to help rebuild the country after the Second World War. And they would have brought with them their hopes, their dreams, and most importantly, their precious record collections. And this would have been the early kind of rock steady and blue beat. This is before reggae kind of really emerged in the like early 70s, to be honest. And so they would have been listening to things like Toots and the Maytals and Prince Buster. And also, funnily enough, that generation had a real fondness for country and Western music. I don't know why. I got no idea. And I do remember a particular favorite of my dad's was a tune by Jim Reeves. I can't remember the title of the song now, but Jim Reeves was really popular. And they also like the crooners. They like people like Nat King Cole and Brooke Benton. You wouldn't know who any of these people are. So I'm sort of getting all this Jamaican and a bit of American stuff coming in one ear. But at school, I'm listening to what my white mates are listening to, So they're listening to the emerging pop music. We're talking about the Beatles, the Stones, the Kinks, the Who, things like that. And I really grew up on a combination of that, bass culture in one ear and pop and rock in the other.
That's really, really interesting. So next I want to talk about a very interesting part of your life, which is back in 1975. You ran a clothing store called, am I pronouncing this right? Acme Attractions. Is that
Absolutely
how you pronounce
right?
it?
Yep.
Perfect. So you ran a clothing store called Acme Attractions, which actually attracted many people, such as The Clash and Bob Marley. But before that started to become more of a bigger thing, you actually met Bob Marley in the hotel that he was staying in after a concert that you went to see. How was that like?
Oh, man. It's funny. People make a big deal of this, our encounter in London. Basically, because by the end of his stay in London in 1977, we had a little argument about punk rock. And, it's funny. I don't like going on about Bob Marley because people make such a big deal out of it. But anyway, like you said, I saw him in, I think, 1975. There was a concert at the Lyceum in London. And I was so taken by his music that I followed his coach back to his hotel and blagged my way into his room and basically struck up a conversation with him, prompted by something that I had that he liked. You got to read between the lines here, Logan. I don't know what the demographic of your audience is, and God forbid I get us all in trouble. Anyway, yeah, I had something that Bob Marley liked. We became friends. Well, friends is a stretch. I'd say we became acquaintances. He knew who I was. This is in 1975. Later on, in 1977, when he came to stay in England after being shot in Jamaica, he was effectively in exile here. He was staying around the corner from my shop, Acme Attractions. And he'd stop by Acme Attractions and I'd sort him out. Let's put it that way. And this was the time when punk rock exploding all around us as well. So one day I go around his place and I'm wearing punk rock trousers and he starts to make fun of me. And I had to kind of pull him up and say, Bob, he'd been reading the tabloid press, Logan, and he got a very twisted idea of what punk was about. He thought it was about sort of negativity and nihilism, and it was never about that. It was about empowerment and freedom and individuality. Anyway, he starts taking the mick out of my punk rock clothes, and I stood my ground and I said, look, mate, you're wrong. These white guys are my friends. We're like-minded rebels. And he basically said, yeah, get the hell out of here. And I left with my tail between my legs. Anyway, 3 months later, a better informed Bob Marley was moved to write that song, Punky Reggae Party. And, I've got to give him props for being open-minded. I got to give him props for being open-minded enough to realize he was wrong and reassess the whole punk thing, Yeah. But that encounter is the thing that keeps getting regurgitated over and over. I've done a lot of other things besides meet Bob Marley, believe me.
Oh, don't worry. I'm not saying that's the only thing you've done at all. That's very interesting.
No, I just don't like trading on his name, man. It feels weird,
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. That makes a lot of sense. So then, this is really interesting. In 1976, you became a DJ at the Roxy Club. So how did this come about? Were you asked to become a DJ at the Roxy Club, or did you come to them?
Okay, first of all, it was 1977.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right, no big deal. 1977, what's in a year or two? Journalists don't care. Basically, it's 1977. Let's set the scene. It's London, and this thing's exploding all around me. Punk rock, a new soundtrack for a new generation. And they had an attitude, they had a look, they had a soundtrack, but at that point, they had no place to play. So a friend of mine, a guy called Andrew Tchaikovsky, opened the very first live punk rock venue in the UK, the Roxy. And because of the reaction that he saw to the music I played at Acme Attractions, which was hardcore dub reggae, that was the soundtrack of Acme Attractions, he asked me to have a go at DJing at the Roxy. And again, because this was so early in the movement, there weren't any UK punk records to play anyway. So what's a guy to do? I'm going to play what I like. I'm playing my hardcore dub reggae selection. And luckily for me, the punks loved it. I mean, I did drop in some other things that I knew were connected, like the Ramones and Television and Patti Smith, the kind of the New York scene. But primarily in between the fast and furious punk rock live sets, I played dub reggae to kind of chill the crowd out. And that's kind of, where this whole idea of the punky reggae thing really came together.
That's actually really interesting. And I love the way you mentioned there about punk and reggae. We'll come back to that a lot throughout it, but that's really interesting about the Roxy Club. And next I wanted to ask about your first film, which was used money from the store Acme Attractions, and then you also used money from your DJing to buy, I believe, was it a Super 8 camera?
A Super 8 camera, that's right.
To start filming your first film, which was called the punk rock movie.
Yeah.
So what inspired you to start filming a movie?
Okay, that's easy. What I think is most interesting about the whole punk rock movement, the 1977 version anyway, wasn't so much the soundtrack. Well, I think the greatest gift from that scene was the whole idea of DIY. do it yourself. And I mean, I think that's why we're still talking about punk today, is that it wasn't just a soundtrack. You know, that energy informed lots of different people and movements and mediums. I mean, you know, there was punk rock photographers, journalists, fashion designers, graphic artists, you know, and filmmakers. And, you know, when the whole 77 energy was happening, you know, all my mates are picking up guitars, and I wanted to pick up something too. And I picked up a Super 8 movie camera. I have to say, inspired by me seeing a film 5 years earlier called The Harder They Come, Jamaica's most famous film. And I remember when I saw that film thinking, wow, I wouldn't mind expressing myself in that medium, you know, film. But in the early 70s, that was a really ridiculous idea for a young black man. But fast forward 5-6 years, punk rock explodes with the whole DIY thing. I pick up a Super 8 camera and reinvent myself as Don Letts the filmmaker. And truth be told, the punk rock movie was never supposed to be my first film. What happened was, I'm filming all the stuff that I like. You know, I'm filming the Clash and the Pistols and the Banshees and the Buzzcocks and Subway Section Slits. And then one day I read in the NME, a music journal, Don Letts is making a punk rock movie. And I thought, oh, that's a good idea. I'll call it a movie. And I stuck it together and I called it the punk rock movie, because that's what it said in the NME. And that was really my entrance into the world of film. And then after that, I mean, obviously, I got better after that. You know, I quickly moved into doing videos for a lot of the punk bands. The first video I ever did was for Public Image's debut single. Then I did the Clash's first video, London Calling, did all the Clash videos, and then basically went on to do about, I don't know, 350 music videos.
Whoa, that's a lot.
Here's an interesting fact. The very last video I directed was for Sinead O'Connor.
No way.
Her last single. It's a single called Trouble of the World. And it's a cover of a gospel song by Mahalia Jackson. And if you tell your listeners to check it out, because everybody ignored it at the time, just like they did Sinead. And have a look. It's particularly touching considering what happened.
Well then, definitely, guys, check out Sinead's page on Spotify or whatever platform you use.
I don't even know if it's there, but anyway, the video is called Trouble of the World, and it's on YouTube. That's brilliant. The last video I directed.
So the video's there. That's brilliant. Thank you, Don. So you should check that out, guys. So now I want to move on to something very interesting, which is the Clash, where you were saying just there that you did a lot of the videos with the Clash. But were you friends with the members of the Clash before they asked you to do the videos? Or it was kind of like they kind of found you, or you once met them and they asked, look, we're looking for a director for our videos?
Okay. Basically, we all became friends, and not only the Clash, you know, the Sex Pistols or members of the Pistols, the Slits. I became friends with a lot of these bands, two reasons: because of the shop Acme attractions, but primarily because of our mutual love of Jamaican music. They were really interested in reggae music at that time, because that was their rebellious soundtrack. Because, you know, young white working class kids have a tradition of gravitating towards black music for their rebellious fix. You know, before that, it would have been, I don't know, R&B or whatever. But at that time, the rebellious soundtrack for white working class kids was reggae. And I had the best selection because, you know, of my Jamaican roots. So we became friends because of that. Then they would have seen me filming and all their stuff at the Roxy and other live gigs as well. And that's, yeah, we were friends before they asked me to start filming for them. But basically, they gave me a break. You know, we were turning each other on through our respective cultures. You know, there was a lot of this, kind of cultural exchange going on, man.
Very interesting. And then when you became the videographer for the Clash, and afterwards Big Audio Dynamite, which I'll come back to, but how did you really like? I know you mentioned there that you were friends before, but how did you become their videographer? Did they ask you to
Yeah,
do
I
it?
mean, basically, John Rotten, as he was known back then, Johnny Rotten, he asked me to do his first debut single, which was called Public Image. And then I guess the Clash, yeah, I was around, I was their friend. They knew that I could pull off doing a video. And I've got to say, I mean, the Public Image video is very simplistic because it's hard to explain to you, Logan, but basically when I was doing the punk rock movie, it was just me with my little Super 8 camera. The minute you got into TV back then, you had to be part of what they call a union crew. So all of a sudden, I'm on a set with like working with 10 white guys I'd never met in my life. So, I had to kind of find my feet. And to be honest with you, the Public Image video, the only reason it has any depth and gravitas is because of John and the band's performance. Not long after, the Clash asked me to do their first video, and I'm like, okay, I got to get my shit together. Sorry, Logan, I got to get my stuff together. And I decided to kind of, get my head around the process of filmmaking. So I come out of the studio, I set the band up in an exterior situation, which was by the River Thames. And that nearly turned into a disaster because, again, I'm finding my feet, making it up as I go along. And it was supposed to be shot in the daytime, that video. But by the time I got everything together, it was nighttime and pissing down with rain. But it turned out to be a great video, again, because of the dynamics of the Clash and the atmosphere created by God.
That's really. So actually, then, back to Big Audio Dynamite, where I mentioned earlier.
Forward to Big Audio Dynamite, but anyway, yeah. Big Audio Dynamite's after the Clash, but yeah, go on.
Oh yeah, that's what I was saying. That I mentioned it earlier. But anyways, after the Clash's Mick Jones left, then he went on, and as well you went on to Big Audio Dynamite, and you became the videographer as well as the sampler for Big Audio Dynamite. So did you go to Mick, or did he come to you to become part of the band?
Mick came to me. Well, kind of. I was in the club with him one night, and it was me, Mick, and my bandmate, Leo Williams, who's now in Dread Zone, another Rasta brethren, basically. And Mick was standing between me. Mick was standing between me and Leo. So there's a white guy sandwiched between two black guys, basically. And Mick looked to his left and he looked to his right, and he's like, we look like a band. We should form a group. And I had to raise my hand and say, but Mick, I can't play anything. And I remember his response was, don't worry about that, Don. Neither could Paul when he joined the Clash. Because when Paul Simonon joined the Clash, they had to put stickers on the fret of his bass to show him how to play. The difference between Paul Simonon and Don Letts is Paul eventually learned to play and got rid of his stickers. I never got rid of mine. So Mick asked me to join the band.
Okay, that's interesting. And then lately you started with solo career, which is brilliant. I just want to say, you recently released your album Outta Sync, which I love.
Thanks for having good taste, Logan.
But what inspired you to write a new album?
COVID. I was bored, man. I can't sit still, Logan. And basically, I couldn't do a DJ out and about anymore, obviously. Luckily, I could keep my radio show going because I guess I've got a radio show on the BBC.
Yeah, BBC Radio 6.
Yeah, Culture Clash Radio every Saturday night between 9 and 11. That was a plug, Logan. Anyway, what was I saying? So COVID hit us. I'm twiddling my thumbs. I got together with a friend of mine called Gaudi, who's an extraordinary Anglo-Italian musician and producer who co-wrote the album with me and indeed produced it. And we just got together because of our mutual love of bass culture and pop music. Like me, he loves, he grew up on sound system culture and he loves Jamaican music, but he also loves pop music. His favorite band is the Smiths. One of my favorite bands when I was growing up as a kid was the Beatles. And we somehow found a way to put this combination of our influences into what effectively is a soundtrack to my mind, Logan. That's what it is. And it's kind of, it's a soundtrack to my cultural journey, which is Black and British. You know, it's a reflection of the duality of my existence. And I've got to tell you, I'm really, really proud of it. And I've got to say, I've got to give thanks to some of the other contributors, because it's not all about Don Letts. I had Hollie Cook on there, who's on 2 songs. There's Zoe Devlin Love, who sings with the Alabama 3. And the gentleman called Wayne Coyne from the Flaming Lips. Are you familiar with the Flaming Lips?
Yeah, I know the Flaming Lips, yeah.
Okay, everybody should know the Flaming Lips, really.
I know.
Get a chance, see them live. Better than drugs and cheaper too. So a collaborative effort. I can't believe I pulled it off, you know.
It's just, if you guys haven't listened to Don Letts' album, it was only released this September. So this year, at the moment, at the time of recording, it's 2023. But you should definitely check it out, you guys. It's really, really good. And now I want to ask you a bit of a deep question. What does music mean to you?
What does music mean to me? Well, I grew up listening to music that helped you to be all you can be. It was a kind of a tool for social and personal change. I think people today forget that it has that potential, but I'm living proof that that dynamic works. You know, in the 21st century, you could be forgiven in thinking that the only thing that music does now is it's like a soundtrack for passive consumerism, you know, for selling you stuff. But it does have the potential to inform and inspire. And that's what it means to me. It's my inspiration, man. You know, for some people it's a job, for some it's a hobby, but yeah, it's my life. Still gets me out of bed on a day-to-day basis. Still keeps me in touch with what's going on in the world today, because I'm a great believer. You mustn't get stuck in your soundtrack. You know, I think you've got to be receptive to all that's around you. I'm not one of these people that thinks that music was better in my day. I think when you start saying that, you've really got old. Not that I desire to be young, because the other interesting thing about what music's done is it's changed the landscape, Logan. You know, my generation, we didn't become our parents. I know that sounds weird. You know, we've had this, or I guess it's it's afforded us a luxury of staying in touch with the now. Do you know? I mean, in my song, Outta Sync, I said, what is that? You know, the young ain't what they used to be, but neither are the old. You know, it's changed the landscape, and it's kept me alive, man.
That's a great way to live, actually, with that mindset. And then you were like one of the founding fathers of the punk reggae movement, I would say.
Yeah, you know what?
You were a massive part of it, but how did it feel, big part or small part, to be part of the movement?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm definitely, I could justify saying I'm part of the movement. I don't know about major player. I'm just glad to have participated in the game, kind of thing. Remember I said to you about seeing The Who when I was 14 and wanting to be in this world? And I can, at my age now, look back and say, okay, I've been part of this thing. I've chipped in my 5 cents. I've justified the space I occupy, which is really important. I mean, that's another thing I got from the whole punk rock thing. It was, it wasn't enough to be a bystander. You wanted to bring something to the table yourself. And I got that from punk rock. I've forgotten your question, Logan. What was it?
That how did it feel to be part of the movement?
I feel privileged to have been born at the same time as rock and roll, and double privileged to have bumped into those crazy punk rockers, man. They opened the door for me and stopped me from becoming just a fan.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. And now I have two questions for you regarding recommending people music. If somebody wasn't really or wasn't aware of the concept of the punk reggae kind of scene,
Yep.
where would you recommend for them to start?
Well, you could point to obvious things like the Clash, with their interpretation of Police and Thieves. And in fact, there's the tune Bank Robber, White Man in Hammersmith Palais. And they weren't trying to play reggae. They were trying to do their own thing with it. It's very important that you're not slavishly copying stuff. You have to give it your own identity. Do you know what I mean? Then, the Slits were really informed by, you listen to their bass lines. Public Image, particularly Public Image, if you listen to Jar Wobble's bass lines and the production particularly, because, they're taking tips from, producers like King Tubby and Lee Scratch Perry, it's totally informed by the techniques that were created in these tiny studios of Jamaica back in the 70s. But the thing is about the punky reggae party, it's not necessarily just about those two genres. It was a sort of a clumsy way of saying, be open to everything that's around you. You know what I mean? It's about being open-minded as opposed to being fixed on those two genres. For instance, look at the difference between the Clash's first album, their debut album, and London Calling. On London Calling, you can hear all the different influences. There's reggae, there's funk, there's a bit of jazz, there's jungle, there's R&B, there's dub, and they're doing their own version of that stuff. But all of a sudden, instead of being closed-minded, they're being open to all the world has to offer. And it sounds great, especially if it's got a good bass line. So like I said, the punky reggae party is not particularly about just those genres, man. It's about being open to all the world has to offer. Yeah, being open-minded.
I totally agree with you. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm definitely going to take something from this. And before I go, and before we finish up, I wanted to ask you about dubstep music and dub.
Yep.
If somebody wasn't familiar with the genre, where do you think they'd start?
Whoa. Oh, that's easy, really. I can just drop your names like, look at any of the early works by people like Lee Scratch Perry, King Tubby, Bunny Lee. These are all Jamaican producers. If you wanted me to name albums, I'd cite an album by Keith Hudson called Pick-a-Dub, which was one of the very first dub albums, along with Lee Scratch Perry's Blackboard Jungle. Both of those came out in the early 70s. And for those that don't know, dub music is effectively instrumental Jamaican music where dub is center stage. And it's about bass and it's about space, and, those sonic experiments have become part of the fabric of a lot of today's contemporary music. Actually, I did a radio documentary about King Tubby that might still be available on this thing called BBC Sounds. What was it called? I can't remember, man. Something King Tubby. Yeah, let your fingers do the work and check on Google or something. But yeah, I did a radio doc on King Tubby.
Okay, so that's very interesting. And I think if there's anybody here who isn't familiar with punk or reggae, or as well dubstep or dub, anything to do with that, Don's giving you a couple of recommendations, so I go with them. And
actually, I'm going to interrupt you, Logan, because a shortcut of all of that, as I just remembered, man, because I've done a lot of stuff. I did a compilation called Dread Meets Rockers Uptown, right? And it's a compilation albums, probably on Spotify or whatever. I'm not trying to sell you anything, but that was a selection of the tracks that I played at the Roxy. And I can highly recommend it if you want a shortcut to all the stuff I've just been saying, because it's got tracks by all those people, I think. It's called Dread Meets Punk Rockers Uptown, and it's a soundtrack to the Roxy.
So there you go, guys. Thank you so much, Don. You've answered all the questions perfectly. And I really enjoyed being able to talk to you about your life and what you've done.
Listen, Logan, I got to give thanks for you giving a shit at your age. It's great to be able to have done something that has resonated with somebody that's across the generations. Because man, you weren't even the twinkle in your dad's eye when I was doing my thing. So yeah, respect, brethren. You know, because that gives my work meaning. You know, I've got to tell you, the fact that it's connected with somebody I've never met, you know, yeah, that gives it meaning, man. It's got to count for something. So thank you.
Thank you. I know you just said thank you, but that was, this has been brilliant, Don. So I hope to hear of you in the future. I'll be keeping an eye out for if you've got anything new coming up. And make sure to listen into Don's radio show as well. So that's BBC Radio 6 on Saturday nights, 8 to 11, did you say, Don?
9 till 11,
Oh,
BBC 6 Music. It's called Culture Clash Radio.
Brilliant. So you guys make sure to check that out and listen in. Thank you so much, Don. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Logan. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Logan Sounds Off. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe as well, because I do this kind of thing all the time. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye. First of all, before we get into anything, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me. Even with your background and the research that I've done into you. Obviously, before all this, I knew a good bit about you, but even now, you're so musically talented and so interesting.
Oh, I don't know about the musically talented. I have got good taste, however. Because funnily enough, Logan, you know something? I can't actually play an instrument. Did you know that?
No.
No, I can't play a single.
I never heard of you playing an instrument, but I know you were a sampler with Big Audio Dynamite.
That's right, samples and all that stuff. But on stage with Big Audio Dynamite, right, I used to have colored stickers on the keyboard to show me what to do. Because Mick got me to join the band because I couldn't play. So my ideas came from other places. You know, I mean, that's where the whole sample and dialogue thing came from, is that I wanted to contribute. You know, you got to contribute to the band, otherwise you're baggage. So while the guys were laying down the tracks in the studio, I'd be looking for bits of dialogue and things from classic movies. But then I quickly realized, right, Logan, that you don't get paid for stealing other people's stuff. So what I then did was throw myself into writing lyrics with Mick's help, it has to be said. And I think the first lyrics I ever wrote with Mick was a song called E = MC squared.
Yeah, I love that
song.
Which
was like our second single or something. And then from then on, that was my main contribution to the band, was actually writing songs with Mick. And then on stage, I'd be playing samples and dialogue and stuff like that. And also doing a bit of kind of rapping, you know.
That's really, really cool to talk to you about everything, because your music and your taste in music is really, really cool, and nothing that's ever been seen before on my podcast. So it's going to be very interesting. So Don, if you're ready, would you like to get into it?
Yep.
Brilliant. Hello and welcome to Logan Sounds Off. Today I am interviewing Don Letts. Don, how are you?
Fine, thank you, and thanks for having me, Logan.
I actually noticed, I don't know the name of the picture that you have behind you, but is it the blue woman? It's an Asian picture that you have behind you, on your door. Here? On your door.
Oh, on my door. That's the blue lady, the green lady. Yeah. It's a sort of kitsch picture that was very popular in the 60s. And I actually wrote a song about that painting with Big Audio Dynamite.
No way.
Yeah. Back in the day, you know, I grew up sort of poor and working class, or relatively poor. And our only way of having anything exotic was to buy these mass-produced paintings that were produced by Woolworths. And we put that up in, well, our parents, not me, but my parents, you put that up in their living room, and that would be their bit of exotica, their escape from the council flats they were living in.
That's really cool though, because there's an album called Slap by Chumbawamba, and that's actually the album cover.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're probably of the same generation. We're old people.